They tooled up and dressed themselves for war.
The gangs have re-emerged much stronger, much more powerful, much more ruthless and far more immoral than the ones that went before.
I woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning with my finger on the trigger. I nearly put the trigger in my sleep and I woke up sweating and I started to think, this is crazy.
It's only by governments and particularly police services working together with Interpol, with Europol, that you can really crack down on these gangs.
This is a very dangerous precedent when the big tribes go to war. We don't know where this is going to end.
From the south coast of Spain to the north side of Dublin, there's a battle raging in the criminal underworld. Two Irish drugs cartels, one of them now based in the Mediterranean, are locked in a feud. The men who lead them used to be associates, joint godfathers in a multi-million euro operation. But their sons and nephews have fallen out, and it's brought a plague on both their houses. The weigh-in was taking place for a boxing match, aptly named the Clash of the Clans. It abruptly ended when gunmen, armed with assault rifles, burst in and opened fire. People fled in terror, children as young as 5, screaming for their lives. But the assailants had already claimed a victim. One man lay dead by the hotel reception. There were 6 men in the hit squad, some of them dressed as a police tactical unit.
The message was, this is war. They tooled up and dressed themselves for war. In almost 30 years in this business, it was one of the most audacious crimes I've ever seen. They dressed up as a police SWAT team, 3 of them, armed with AK-47s of the type brought into this country by the provisional IRA in the 80s. 2 other members of the gang are dressed disguised as a couple in the crowd, in this crowded hotel, and the driver is also equipped with an AK-47.
A brazen assault in broad daylight, it demanded an unprecedented security response. The deployment of heavily armed police officers reflecting the scale of the threat. They set up vehicle checkpoints in a bid to halt the tit-for-tat killings in this turf war. On one side, there's Jerry Hutch. The man they call the Monk is far from saintly. He's thought to have masterminded the 2 biggest armed robberies in Irish history. On the other side, Christy Kinahan, an Irish drugs baron with convictions in 3 countries. Now based on the Costa del Sol, Kinahan has built one of the top criminal empires in Europe. He speaks 4 languages, has 2 university degrees, and flies across the continent by helicopter. Gary Hutch was the first victim, a nephew of the Monk, shot dead in Spain. David Byrne was next to die, a foot soldier of Kinahan. He was killed at the weigh-in. Eddie Hutch was the 3rd victim, a brother of Jerry, and considered a soft target. This was the woman who dubbed Jerry Hutch the Monk, the Irish journalist Veronica Guerin. A 37-year-old investigative reporter, she confronted the crime lords and paid with her life. She's immortalised in a movie starring the actress Kate Blanchett. It was 1996 when a gunman on a motorbike shot her dead when she stopped at traffic lights.
Everyone in the Republic of Ireland remembers where they were when they heard that Veronica Guerin had been murdered on the Naas Road.
With journalists again under threat, her brother Jimmy says police have lost this battle.
We're in a much worse place now than we were 20 years ago. The gangs have re-emerged much stronger, much more powerful, much more ruthless and far more immoral than the ones that went before.
Jimmy, this is a difficult question, but if police have lost the battle, did Veronica die in vain?
I would believe if we take the way we are living today, there was nothing gained from Veronica's death. And yes, her death was in vain. I have always said that it was too high a price to pay, but unfortunately we've paid an extremely high price for nothing at all.
What kind of money are we talking about? How lavish a lifestyle are these criminals living?
We're talking about these people having an unbelievable display of wealth. David Byrne, who was shot dead on Friday, is understood to have driven a Lamborghini. We have drug dealers, small-time drug dealers going around in top-of-the-range Range Rovers. The amount of money that's out there is frightening, and what's even more frightening is that the gangs seem to have become aware of how to hide it from the Criminal Assets Bureau.
They weren't able to hide everything. In 2010, these cars were seized during a dawn raid in Spain. Police officers from 3 countries took part, 750 of them. 32 people were arrested, but no one was talking at Kinahan's €8 million villa.
Sorry to trouble you, but we're just keen to ask a couple of questions about some police activity here yesterday.
It's a far cry from inner-city Dublin, where dozens are now trapped in the cycle of addiction. But the supply and demand of drugs is one thing, the culture of guns, another altogether.
We had the noughties, an unprecedented spiral of organised crime on a level that we'd never seen before, and in fact put Ireland on a per capita basis the most murderous state in Europe at one stage, on a per capita basis. This is a very dangerous precedent. When the big tribes go to war, we don't know where this is going to end.
So how did Dublin become one of the gangland murder capitals of Europe? 200 killings in 16 years. Well, there's €1 billion of criminal assets to be fought over. That's a conservative estimate. And there's never been any shortage of guns in Ireland, the cloudy line between terrorism and criminality. This feud has lifted the lid on that underworld, and right in the middle of a general election campaign. The bloodshed has revealed another side to Dublin. It's one they'd rather not talk about. But Sky News has spoken to a reformed criminal about his life in the city's underworld.
I became pretty much a senior player in the criminal world, doing armed robberies and stuff. I went in and out of prisons, and prison is basically like a university. You go into prison, a car thief, you come out an armed robber. You go in an armed robber, you come out a drug dealer. You know, so you're always meeting new people in prison, new connections. If you have a good name on the streets, they want to know you, and you get pulled into the gangs like that, you know.
From the poorest of working-class districts, the story Sean tells is not that uncommon. The victim of a violent father, he ended up living on the streets. Only the toughest survive. Progressing from petty crime to armed robbery, he feared for his life and brought his gun to bed at night.
I had a Glock under my pillow, a Glock 10 under my pillow. I woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning with my finger on the trigger. I nearly put the trigger in my sleep, and I woke up sweating and I started to think, this is crazy. My life has to change, because I knew it was very close to me going in the hole or going into prison. It was one or the other. And a lot of my friends would have been shot dead around Dublin city centre. I came to the point where my best friend was took up the Wicklow Mountains and shot in the head and buried in an unmarked grave. And I knew at that point I had to do something to change my life, and I knew I had to pull away from all the activity of gangs and drugs and the criminal world myself, you know.
So you believe if you had not stepped away from that lifestyle, you'd be dead?
Oh, I'd be dead. I'd be long dead. Yeah, long dead. Yeah.
The government's pledged an extra €5 million for the fight against organised crime. Opposition parties described that as too little too late in light of recent bloodletting. But how do you tackle drugs barons with more assets at their disposal than the police? With access to vast sums of cash and an arsenal of weapons, they appear to be untouchable. Gangland crime is an international issue, and Ireland wants to see an international response.
The very nature of gangland activity and involvement in drugs now is so international. It's only by governments, and particularly police services, working together with Interpol, with Europol, that you can really crack down on these gangs. They become very sophisticated. They're using the dark net. They don't leave their messages on mobile phones anymore. They're using all sorts of apps. So it needs very sophisticated policing and great international cooperation, which I'm glad to say we have.
Get back! Get away!
In the cut and thrust of the election campaign, it's a little uncomfortable for Sinn Féin. Thomas Slab Murphy, the IRA's alleged chief of staff, was recently convicted of tax evasion. He's long been suspected of running a lucrative smuggling operation on the Irish border. But the tension in the Irish capital has been fuelled by the next generation of racketeer. The sons and nephews of Jerry Hutch and Christy Kinahan are taking reckless to a whole new level.
The reason I believe that this has come to this pass is because they are paying for the sins of the hot-headed young fellas, the young guys down the line. And they are ruthless young thugs. So the older guys have to actually defend them.
Sean had a string of convictions, but has turned his life around at a church called Liberty. He now runs The Lighthouse, a drop-in centre for the homeless.
I let the guys on the streets know. I know a lot of people who are still involved in gangs, drugs. A lot of my friends went through the prisons. A lot of my friends are on the streets. A lot of my friends are also dead. So for the ones who are still alive, I inject hope into their lives and let them know that it doesn't have to be like that. That there is a way off the streets, there's a way out of gangs, and there's a way out of prisons. You know, and it worked for me, it can work for them.
It's a rare glimpse of hope in the midst of a murder spree that's rocked Dublin to the core. Cold-blooded killing in a hotel full of guests presents the next government with a serious challenge.
It's the stuff of crime novels, but there's nothing fictitious about the threat of the violence escalating. This is more than a petty squabble between rival families, each with their pride at stake. It's a battle for control of lucrative markets at home and abroad, cocaine, heroin and synthetic drugs. And every security source we've spoken to gave us the same assessment. It's far from over.